All right, well, hello and welcome to the third webinar of our 2026 Solar Show. Today's session is called Optimizing Your Solar Array. Please note that we have enabled closed captioning for this presentation. You can turn the captioning on in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be recording this session and making it available on our website and YouTube channel following the show. My name is Heather McKenzie and I'm the Executive Director at Solar Alberta. I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge that I'm hosting you today and working day to day from Amiskwaciwaska, also known as Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, located on Treaty 6 territory and the homelands of the Otipemisiwak Métis Nation. Treaty 6 territory is the traditional gathering place and home of many Indigenous peoples, including the Bapachase, Nehewak or Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Blackfoot, and Nakota Sioux, nations whose ancestors have cared for and nurtured these lands since time immemorial. Today we'll be hearing from Stephanie Westland of Solar Alberta, Justin Smalley, a University of Alberta engineering graduate and solar enthusiast, and Darren Chu of Utility Network and Partners. Following the presentation, there will be a question and answer period in which you can all participate. The entire session will wrap up in an hour and a half. We're going to be using Zoom Q&A for questions today rather than the chat box, so please enter your questions in the Q&A section throughout the presentation. Also, please click on the little thumbs up symbols to upvote questions that you like. Before we move forward, we're going to do a quick poll just to get a sense of who we have joining us today. So please take a minute to answer the question popping up on your screen now. And while some are still doing the poll, I encourage you to take a minute, pop your name, land acknowledgement, any contact info you're comfortable sharing in the chat now and throughout the event so that others can look you up on LinkedIn or email you. A great way to form new relationships. All right, thank you so much for participating. Let's have a little look at these results here. I was expecting some microgenerators in the house today, so I see 30% or so are actively generating electricity these days. Thank you for that. Got some solar industry folks in the house, lots of curious people and knowledgeable folks as well. And thank you to our government reps who have joined us as well today. Awesome. Always good to get a sense of who we have joining us before we dive in. Now, a little about Solar Alberta. We're actually in our 35th year of operation. Solar Alberta is a nonprofit society dedicated to accelerating Alberta's transition to a just and sustainable energy future. We do that through advocacy, education, and serving as an industry and community hub for solar energy. Our membership is made up of approximately 200 individuals and 140 businesses. We also have more than 34,000 followers. We provide a number of services, including managing a solar directory through our website. In this way, we act as a bridge for installers, suppliers, and other solar-related businesses to connect with their customers and clients. Our directory gets approximately 23,000 hits each year. You can see a link to it in the chat. After today's session, there are still 3 more webinars available as part of the 2026 Solar Show. There is still time to register for all of them, including the one other free session, the State of Solar Farms in Alberta. We're also running 2 affordable industry-oriented workshops. Registration for all the upcoming Solar Show sessions can be completed through the link in the chat, and there is a 10% discount for members for the paid sessions. At this point, we'd love to do another quick poll just to find out which Solar Show sessions you've already attended or are still planning on attending. Please take a minute to answer the question popping up on your screen now. And just a reminder as you do that poll that you can also find free archived videos of all our previous free Solar Show sessions on our YouTube channel, and the recordings from the 2026 Solar Show will be available by the second week of February. All previous paid workshops are available on our website. All right, let's have a quick peek at this poll. Okay, lots of you were at Solar 101 yesterday. Great. Oh, wow, a good chunk of you joined us this morning too. Thank you for that. I'm not surprised to see many of you are going to come for tomorrow's lunch hour session. And of course, I bet all those industry folks here are the ones coming to our 2 paid sessions. So very exciting. Glad you're going to be with us for the rest of the week, many of you, and looking forward to seeing you again. Throughout the year, in addition to the solar show, we also run the Solar Series webinars. On February 26th, we're launching the 2026 Solar Series with a webinar called Alberta Incentive to Green Your Home or Business, SEEP Explained. Our registration is free and can be completed through the link in the chat. As with our other solar show sessions, you can always find free archived videos of our Solar Series webinars on our YouTube channel as well. We also offer a number of classes for those in the solar industry and those transitioning into it. We've recently completed our live online training series and we'll be offering courses again next fall. In the meantime, we have on-demand recordings of all our courses available for sale in the solar training videos section of our website. In addition to providing education about solar, we advocate for it. We are currently rising up for renewables, so we have free lawn signs available for pickup in 10 municipalities, and we offer free delivery in 8 municipalities around Alberta. We also have template letters for you to use on our website, asking the Government of Alberta to eliminate the discriminatory rules and regulations they have established for renewable energy. You can click the link in the chat to make a free sign order or find our template letters today. Solar Alberta's second annual golf tournament fundraiser is going to be on June 8th, 2026 at the Inglewood Golf Club in Calgary. Tickets are available for individual golfers as well as at a discounted rate for a 4-pack. In addition, new for this year, even if you're not a golfer, you can still attend the meal at the golf club. We're also looking for sponsors for this event, and more details on the link to registration are available through the link in the chat. If you're not already a Solar Alberta member, just want to encourage you to join. Individual memberships are typically $35, but they're on sale this week for 20% off, and they can be purchased at the link in the chat. And if you'd like to support the work that we're doing at Solar Alberta in additional ways, please consider volunteering or donating. On the topic of volunteering, we have 4 positions coming available in our board of directors. The positions will be filled at the May 6th AGM. If you're interested in becoming a part of our board, use the link in the chat to apply by March 1st. I wanted to mention today in particular that you do not have to be an industry affiliated solar person to apply to be on our board. In fact, this year we are looking specifically for folks who are not working in the solar industry because we need enough non-industry board members to fill up our ethics committee who can't be conflicted. So microgenerators would be very welcome, and also just anyone who's passionate about solar. Lastly, with your help, we are recognizing long-time dedicated contributors to solar in Alberta by gifting them a free lifetime Solar Alberta membership. If you know someone who has contributed significantly to solar in Alberta, please consider nominating them for this award. You can find the link in the chat for nominations, and we're going to accept those until April 15th to award the recipients at our AGM. A list of previous recipients can be found on our website. Just want to take this opportunity to thank the City of Edmonton for sponsoring today's webinar. City of Edmonton Change for Climate. We really couldn't offer all of this amazing free content without the support of our sponsors. We are always interested in developing more partnerships for our events. If you or your organization want to work with us to educate the public about solar or solar-related technologies, please don't hesitate to reach out. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers for the day. Stephanie Westland has been a microgenerator for 4 years and is passionate about working towards a just and sustainable energy future in Alberta. She's also the education lead for Solar Alberta and is Solar Alberta's primary representative in the Calgary area. She manages all of Solar Alberta's public education programming, including the annual online solar show and Solar Series webinars, as well as the solar training program. Prior to joining Solar Alberta, she was self-employed as a researcher and freelance academic editor. She is a published author and holds an MA in Resources and the Environment and a PhD in Peace and Conflict Studies. Justin Smalley, our second speaker today, is a University of Alberta engineering graduate and solar energy enthusiast. In 2019, while serving on the board of the Inglewood Community League in Edmonton, he spearheaded a project to install a solar energy system on their building. This experience revealed significant issues in how energy rates are communicated to Albertans. Motivated by these insights, Justin has kindly committed himself to improving energy rate transparency across the province through education, advocacy, and innovative software solutions. And our third speaker today is Darren Chu. Darren is the Managing Director at Utility Network and Partners, Inc., a retailer of electricity, natural gas, and internet services in Alberta. Under his strategic leadership, Utility Net's network has experienced exponential growth, now comprised of 43 community energy marketers, with continuous expansion each year. Passionate about making affordable energy accessible to Albertans, Darren plays a key role in actively addressing energy policy and advocating for regulatory changes that benefit consumers. Darren holds a BSc in biology with a minor in genetics from McGill University and a B.Ed in secondary school education from the University of Calgary. Now I'm just going to turn the screen and the mic over to Stephanie to begin the presentations today. And I look forward to chatting with you all during the Q&A. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Heather. So, as mentioned, I am the education lead at Solar Alberta, but today I'll be talking from the perspective of a microgenerator. My family got solar installed at late 2021, and we've been learning a lot about how to make the most of our system since then. My focus will be on understanding how your home uses energy, and how you might consider shifting your habits around appliance use after you get a solar PV system. Then I'll delve into energy monitoring just a little bit and managing expectations around your solar array. First, let's just quickly review one of the key pillars of Alberta's microgeneration regulation, which allows Albertans to meet their own electricity needs by generating electricity from renewable energy sources. Under that regulation, the maximum size of a home's solar array is based on the home's typical annual energy usage. When calculating the maximum size of the PV system, your solar installer will review your energy bills from the previous 12 months. And if you attended Solar 101 yesterday, you might remember this graph, which shows a typical solar production curve in Alberta. Because we are looking at energy production over the period of a year, your solar installation in Alberta will usually underproduce from November to February because there's much less sunlight during these months, and overproduce from May to August. When microgenerators are producing more electricity than their home is using at any one time, that extra electricity is exported to the grid, and they will get a credit on their utility bill for the exported electricity. In May to August, these credits can really add up if the array is sized to meet the home's annual electricity needs. Homeowners can also improve upon the number of credits they receive and therefore the estimated payback time of their installation by reducing their energy consumption or performing energy efficiency upgrades after the installation has been completed. Okay, so let's turn and look at the main electricity users in our homes. Many large appliances like electric ovens and clothes dryers, as well as air conditioners, heat pumps, electric hot water heaters, and hot tubs, as well as electric vehicles, use quite a lot of electricity, and you'll see large spikes in your electricity use when these appliances are running or your EV is charging. That said, if you have a lot of small appliances plugged in and drawing power at the same time, that energy use can also add up. For example, Natural Resources Canada has calculated that around that lighting accounts for about 3.5% of the average Canadian home's energy use. The same can be said for TVs or gaming consoles if there's a lot of screen time in your home. So another really important factor is that all electricity imported from the grid has transmission and distribution fees added to it, which cover the electrical infrastructure that's needed to connect you to the grid. These costs have both a fixed and a variable component. So on your electricity bill, you'll see fixed fees and administration charges, which will not change regardless of how much of your own electricity you use in a month. You'll also see variable fees, and these are the fees that we're talking about today. So these are based on the amount of electricity that you import from the grid, as well as the portion of the transmission and distribution cost for that electricity. And it's these variable fees that you can lower by consuming more of your own energy internally and importing less from the grid. So in fact, if you have a solar array, in addition to your main savings from solar, it's possible to save an additional $300 a year or even more on the variable fees simply by taking more care to use energy when the sun is shining. When you install a solar PV system, you'll want to shift your habits to start running appliances and charging devices during the day. That way, you avoid paying variable fees on that electricity. Of course, you may want to adjust this practice on dark and rainy days or in the winter months. It's important to note, however, that if your solar array doesn't fully cover your electricity usage and you have an electric vehicle, charging your EV overnight when fewer neighbors are using the electricity grid reduces demand on the grid as a whole. Also really important is that unless you're one of those extremely rare people who has battery energy storage attached to your solar, you will lose power in the case of rotating blackouts. So if there are grid alerts or warnings, be sure to pay attention to what you're being asked to do. This now moves us to the next important point. How do you know how much electricity you are making and consuming? Many people with solar use an app to monitor their energy usage and then to change their energy habits. I'll show you some examples of this in a few minutes. When you're using an energy monitoring app, you can start to stagger the use of your large appliances so that you stay within your own energy production. Depending on the size of your solar array and the time of day, and even the time of year, you might not be able to run all of your large appliances at the same time without importing some electricity from the grid. But as you monitor your system and get to know how much energy each appliance uses, you can start to stagger the use of those appliances, such as doing laundry in the morning and baking a cake in the afternoon. Another way of changing your habits around electricity use involves making decisions like hanging dry your laundry more often and using your clothes dryer less. You might also start using smaller appliances in place of larger ones when that's appropriate, such as using an air fryer or microwave instead of an electric oven. If you are purchasing new appliances, be sure to pay attention to the energy efficiency rating. Also, if you need a new oven, you might consider a double oven, where you can choose to cook as much as possible in the small oven, which uses less energy than the larger single oven. Induction cooktops are also more energy efficient than electric cooktops by approximately 10 to 15%. We also need to be aware of something called phantom load or vampire electricity. So when we're talking about phantom power, we're mostly referring to appliances and devices that draw power when they are in standby mode. Things like computers, televisions, cable boxes, internet boxes, essentially anything that's designed to be easily woken up and ready for use, as well as anything with a remote control. It's estimated that standby power consumption in an average home ranges from 5 to 10% of the household energy consumption. 5% is enough to power your fridge for a whole year. So in fact, up to 40% of the annual energy consumption of electronic devices is estimated to occur when they're turned off. And the average home has between 20 and 40 devices that are drawing phantom power at any one time. In Canada as a whole, it's estimated that phantom power totals more than 5.4 terawatt hours, which is the equivalent of the annual power consumption of about 300,000 households. So the only way to guarantee that appliances, devices, and chargers are not drawing power is to unplug them from the outlet or plug them into a power bar that can be turned off. So now moving to apps and energy monitoring. Earlier, I recommended using an energy monitoring app to understand how much electricity your home is using, how much solar energy your home is self-consuming at a particular time, how much energy you are exporting to the grid, and to give you some idea of whether you can start to make some changes in your electricity and energy use. There are a variety of terms for the electricity that you are directly self-consuming. You might also hear it referred to as on-site consumption or behind-the-meter consumption. This information about self-consumption does not show up on your electricity bill. This slide shows screenshots from the same Friday in June 2024 from the monitoring app that came with my solar array. On the left, you can see that the app graphs our home's electricity production and consumption over the day, including the amount of self-consumption. This graph is typically updated in about real time. The bar graph on the right goes into more detail about production and consumption. The green and teal bar shows the overall solar production, where the bright green at the bottom part, and on this particular day it was 16.5 kilowatt hours, was self-consumed, and the remaining teal part, which was 29.4 kilowatt hours, was exported. The orange and blue bar shows the overall energy consumption for the day, where the blue is solar energy we self-consumed, and the orange is energy we imported from the grid. As you can see from the orange on the graph on the left, most of the energy we imported happened overnight, which is fairly typical for summer months. In the winter, we do import more energy from the grid throughout the day. These two screenshots from my app now show examples from approximately 1 year apart. In the image on the left, you can see that there were large spikes that happened when we were doing laundry. This was before we replaced our washer and dryer with more energy efficient models, including a heat pump dryer. The image on the right, which you'll maybe remember from my previous slide, shows what it looks like with more energy efficient appliances. As you can see, we now do laundry and there's still room within our solar production to use other electronic or electric appliances at the same time. If you don't have energy monitoring as part of your current solar array, your installer can give you a quote on adding one to your system. And if they can't support you in this way, please check with one of the other installer members on our directory. In addition, a friend of mine uses a home energy monitor that is external to their solar installation, although still connected to it, and showed some of their information so that I can just show you an alternative. This type of energy monitoring provides appliance-specific real-time monitoring, and there are various monitors available that start around $200 and go up to about $600 depending what you're looking for. Finally, it also just makes sense to talk a little bit about managing expectations around solar. As mentioned, your solar array will typically be sized to meet your home's electricity needs over the previous year. Sometimes people increase their electricity consumption after installing solar. For example, adding an electric vehicle, air conditioner, or hot tub. And then they are disappointed that the system is no longer fully meeting their energy needs. For example, our system was sized to 99% of our usage when we got it. However, over the last few years, we replaced our gas range and oven with an induction stove, and we've since added a long-range electric vehicle. Changes that have decreased our overall environmental footprint, but which increased our household electricity consumption. So now our solar array is producing below our current electricity needs. At some point, we might decide to add more panels, but for now, we're just looking for other ways to reduce our household electricity consumption. Of course, the opposite also holds true. Homeowners can reduce their electricity consumption or perform energy efficiency upgrades after their solar installation has been completed, such as installing more efficient appliances or reducing their electricity consumption in the ways I spoke about earlier. And last but not least, I just wanted to draw your attention to a webinar that Frank Crawford from Passive House Alberta gave at our 2024 solar show about some of the techniques that can be used to avoid an electrical service upgrade and how to reduce your home electricity consumption, including some discussions of load share devices and smart electrical panels. You can watch Frank's presentation for free on our YouTube channel. And with that, I'd love to turn the mic and screen over to Justin Smalley, who is going to go in more depth about calculating your home energy consumption.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. All right, thanks everyone for joining today. I'll absolutely be building on what Stephanie was talking about. So most people think that your solar savings only come from selling electricity back to the grid, but there's actually another huge hidden benefit, and that's the self-consumption. So let's start with a few basics about what that means. So here is an example. This is what happens when your solar panels are not producing electricity, like at night or on a very cloudy day, or in the winter if it's covered in snow. In this situation, you're pulling all your power from the electrical grid, just like you did before you had solar, and this is called importing your electricity. And here's where things get interesting. On a sunny day, your solar panels are generating electricity. Your home uses what it needs first, and that's called self-consumption. And any extra power that you don't need flows back to the grid, and that's called exporting, and you get credits for it on your electricity bill. And there's a third variation of this where it's partly cloudy, or maybe you have a large load in your house at that point in time, and your solar panels are generating. In this case, you're using everything that your panels produce, and that's your self-consumption again. But then you have to pull extra electricity from the grid. So at this point in the day, you're both self-consuming and importing at the same time. So that's the key concept of this presentation, is the self-consumption. It's electricity you make and use yourself. It never leaves your home, but you won't see it listed on your electricity bill, and most people will not see it in their solar monitoring app either. Basically, it's invisible. So before we go on, I want to warn that there will be a little bit of math coming up, but don't worry, there won't be a test, and you won't actually have to do any of the math at home. I ran all the calculations for you, and you can simply benefit from the conclusions. So the graph we're looking at here is 1 day in the life of a home with solar panels. The lower line with the red underneath it is your usage within your house. And the taller line with the green under it is your production from your solar panels. And the blue that you get is the overlapping part in blue. That's your self-consumption. And I give the formula there to calculate the self-consumption. And the tricky part about it is you get production from your solar monitoring app, and you get your exported part from your electricity bill. So I wanted to do a little bit more background. Here's a simplified view of what your bill looks like. This concept could take a full hour to explain, so I'm just going to have to take a high-level view of it. There's two main parts to your bill. There's the electricity itself you pay for, and the delivery fee. But the important thing to remember is when you're importing, you're paying electricity rates and delivery. When you're exporting, you only pay the electricity. You only get credit for the electricity rate, not the delivery. One final concept is in Alberta, there are microgenerator friendly retailers. I've listed the ones I'm aware of here. And the next presenter will be going into detail about what this means. So I'm going to gloss over it a little bit, but the basic idea is you sign up for a higher rate so that you can earn more money when you're exporting more. The rates listed are approximate for Alberta. They vary month to month and location to location, but are relatively stable over time. So let's look at an actual case study here. A clothes dryer uses about 4 kilowatts of power for about 1 hour. So we're going to approximate and say it uses 4 kilowatt hours of electricity. That's 4 units of energy that we pay for. And we're also going to be looking at this clothes dryer used every day during the summer, so about 180 loads. So in this analysis, we're going to be looking at the most simple way to try and figure out the benefit of solar panels. And that's simply by summing up the microgen credits on your bill. And we're going to run through a few scenarios. So first scenario, you run your dryer during the middle of a sunny day. Your solar panels will power the dryer directly. So there's nothing coming in, nothing going out of your house, and net benefit to your bill is 0. Second scenario, you run the dryer in the morning and there's no sun, so you'll have to buy that electricity from the grid. However, you then get to export that same electricity during the day, and you get a nice credit for it. Third scenario, you skip the dryer entirely and dry your clothes. And again, you get that same electricity credit on your bill. So using this method, you get credits if you run the dryer in morning, but not midday. And somehow using the dryer and not using the dryer both give you over $200 of credit. This doesn't feel right, and that's because it's not a complete picture. We need to dig a little bit deeper. So the basic concept of how we get that complete picture is relatively simple in concept. You compare what you would have paid without solar to what you're actually paying now with solar. And the difference between these two things is the savings. Easy in concept, hard to calculate. It comes from three places. The credits you earn from exporting power, the money you save by self-consuming your own power, and a third thing that I call import overpay. And what that means is because we still pay the higher solar rates on our imports, we have to pay more than we would have without solar. This part's actually relatively small. It needs to be accounted for, but not something we need to worry too much about. So again, don't worry too much about the math. Just try to absorb the concepts behind it. So let's go back to our dryer example, and this time we're going to look at a more total financial benefit, not just your bill. So first example again, running the dryer during the day. If we now include the benefit of the self-consumption, we actually get a sizable benefit, $130 a year. And we get to include that because that's electricity you otherwise would have had to pay for without solar. When you run the dryer in the morning, you get export credits during the day, but now we're also going to account for the extra bit you had to import in the morning. And you can see that overall benefit drops quite a bit. And if you hang dry, no change. So we get a much more, or we get the full picture of what the financial benefit of these three different methods is, sort of increasing in value. And a really important note here is we're seeing a positive number for all three of these methods. So no matter which of the things we do, at the end of the day, we're still having a net benefit to ourselves. There's just ways that you can optimize it, one over the other. I've got one more case study here, and instead of just looking at a single appliance, we're looking at an entire house for a period of 6 years. So this is actual data from someone I know. They were a residential customer for 6 years. And I ran this through the full analysis. And if they only looked at their export credits, they earned about $2,000. But when we add in the value of the self-consumption, the total benefit jumped by 63%. So the self-consumption, this was money that they were saving all along. They just didn't know it. And it's not exactly the same as money in your pocket, but it's money that you saved that you otherwise would have had to spend. So my conclusions, first, reducing your electricity overall, wherever you can, is the best way to optimize your solar. Every kilowatt hour you don't use is money back in your pocket. Second thing, make sure you're on the right electricity plans. In Alberta, there's special rates designed for solar customers. And again, that'll be the next presentation. And third, when possible, shift your electricity to sunny hours. Clothes dryers, dishwashers, electric cars. A lot of days, we can do these things during the day with minimal disruption to our lives. And these changes can add up over time. If that's not possible, well, then you're still in the net positive. And that's the end for me. I can pass this off to Darren now. Thanks everyone for your time.
Hi everybody. Thank you, Stephanie and Justin, for covering off the basics. I'm going to wrap all that up for everybody here with solar specific rates. And so that's going to be the focus of this next section here. So there we go. Okay. So my name's Darren. I am the Managing Director for Utility Network and Partners, which we shorten to UtilityNet. And we run the Solar Club, which is a brand that you've probably heard of at some point if you're exploring solar. It is the original loyalty program offering premium rates and benefits to microgenerators. And we've designed this to bring Alberta one step closer to a reliable and sustainable future. So UtilityNet is a local Calgary-based energy management company. We've been in business for 48 years. The company was established in 1978. It's a small family business where our headquarters is here in Inglewood in Calgary. And we retail electricity, natural gas, internet retail services in combination with self-retail and industrial data management services. That industrial side is tailored to oil and gas companies, Imperial Oil, CNRL. You know, if you've heard of an oil and gas company, you've probably had them as a customer or still do have them as a customer. Our Solar Club program is offered through 43 community energy marketers scattered across Alberta. So the image there on your screen is just a smattering of those energy marketers, but it's a program that we offer through all of them. And those are really the brands that you would be dealing with when you're looking at getting access to Solar Club rates. A little bit of history. On the renewable side of things, we've been doing this for quite some time. In 1998, we developed something called Green Report for industrial clients. Green Report was designed to track fugitive nitrogen oxides and sulfur oxide emissions. In 2010, the first solar microgenerator was enrolled on the grid. And then in 2012, we launched a program called Light Up Alberta. And the concept was the founders were driving back to Calgary from Lethbridge, looked out at the countryside and thought, you know, wouldn't it be nice if every one of those homes was lit up by power from UtilityNet? That program eventually morphed into the Solar Club program that everybody knows now today, and that happened in 2019. In 2020, we celebrated our first major milestone by delivering over $1 million in total value earned by Solar Club members back to them, and that was in export credits, cashback, and renewable energy certificates. In 2022, UtilityNet opened up the carbon offset platform as an opportunity for microgenerators to sell their carbon credits alongside the revenue they earn off their exports. And then in 2024, we opened up the Hummingbird Virtual Solar Community, basically as a way to showcase the power of distributed solar generation across the province. The typical path for one of our customers, customers who get quotes from solar installers, they sign the contracts, they can become pre-solar customers with us. They would then select a retailer or an energy marketer. And then once they do that, they get, and their solar is installed, they get the benefits of Solar Club programs or Solar Club rates. So how do solar specific rate plans work? And this really is the terminology that we're going to come back to, is this solar specific rate. That's what we consider the rates that are offered industry-wide by retailers such as ACE, NMAX, and our energy marketers. The image at the top shows you the typical pattern for solar generation. In the winter months, you would be on a lower rate. and in the summer months, you would be on a higher rate. So under the Alberta microgeneration regulation that Stephanie mentioned at the very beginning of this webinar, a microgenerator's retailer shall credit the microgenerator for electric energy supplied out of their site at the rate the retailer charged the microgenerator for energy supplied to their site. So that's a really wordy way of saying you are credited and charged at the very same rate. So the energy that you export and the energy that you are importing, those happen at the same rate in cents per kilowatt hours. Solar specific rate plans leverage this part of the regulation by offering two different rates where you can flip between them at different times of the year. So typically there's a lower rate for the winter months when you consume more than you produce, and that is to lower the cost of your utility bill. Then there's a higher rate for the summer months when you produce more than you consume to maximize your revenue. So the terminology here that you're going to hear a lot is microgen exports and microgen credits. And those two things are different. And so as Stephanie and Justin have covered previously, your solar PV system is always going to feed the site first, right? So that's the self-consumption that they were talking about. Any excess energy is shipped back to the grid. Those are your microgen exports. Therefore, the microgen exports that show up on your bill will never equal the data that shows up on your inverter app. So if you have the AP Systems or EMA app or Solar Edge or one of the inverter apps, what you see on that versus what you see on the bill are going to be very, very different. Okay, and I'll show you an example of that in a couple slides. Under regulation, right, you are credited for your microgen exports at your current rate. So that's whatever rate you've selected at that point in time. Those are your microgen credits. You are also charged for any imports at that same rate. In Alberta, our regulation also stipulates net billing, which is different from net metering. And those two terms get used interchangeably, but they are different. Net billing means you're credited in dollars. Net metering means you're credited in kilowatt hours. And net metering is something we see in other jurisdictions like Ontario. But here in Alberta, we use net billing. And that really works to your advantage as a microgenerator. And I'll show you why. So this comes down to switching between rates. So to maximize the value of a solar specific rate plan, you're switching between the lower rate and the higher rate depending on seasonality. So if your system is sized appropriately, and by appropriately, I mean you have either maximized the size of your system, and that's something your solar installer will do by default. They will show you the most you can install. And if that meets the your average annual consumption, then that is an appropriately sized system. The economics of high rates then work in your favor. So you would switch to the high rate, and as an example, I'll use our current rates. So I have something to refer to. If you switch the high rate, which is currently set at 33 cents a kilowatt hour, you can maximize your credits during periods where you are a net exporter, meaning you are shipping more energy into the grid than you are importing. And that switch typically happens in the spring. You would switch to a low rate, like 6.889 cents per kilowatt hour, to minimize your costs during periods when you are a net importer. And that switch happens in the fall. And so the lower rates tend to be in line with other fixed rates because you are now pulling more energy from the grid. You don't want to be paying that premium when you're using more than your system can generate. If your system is undersized, meaning you don't have the maximum number of panels, or you could only install a certain number because of roof size or other limitations, or your energy costs always outpace your microgen credits, there's no value in switching to a higher rate. So you're really best to either stay on a low rate or a variable rate rather than flipping up to that 33 cents per kilowatt hour. So I myself am a microgenerator. I've had solar on my home for quite some time. Our initial system was actually undersized because we didn't have our bill of sale for our EV yet. And we had just installed the heat pump, and you need a year's worth of data on a heat pump that is auxiliary sourced or auxiliary powered before it can be counted as part of your total annual consumption. So this example is from when our system was undersized. And you can see in the example on the left, the energy cost outpaces the microgen credits. And you can also see on the right, where I've got these two values circled, you can see that the rate is exactly the same. So the rate at that point was 9.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So I was being charged at the top for energy at 9.5 cents, and then I was being credited for all of my exports at 9.5 cents as well. And the math between those two things didn't really work out. Yes, I was offsetting part of my cost, but I wasn't really seeing the true benefits of solar. Something else to point out here, the other costs that are down below, those are the variable and fixed costs that Stephanie mentioned in her presentation. Not every retailer is going to show you the distinction between which ones are variable and which ones are fixed. In a lot of cases, they will just say distribution charges as one line, transmission charges as one line, even though those break down into multiple components. The other thing I want to mention here is the comparison between what shows up on your inverter app and what shows up on the bill. On the bill here, and the numbers are, it's too fast for you probably to do the math, but what was net billed on my invoice was 428 kilowatt hours. When I look at that same period from my inverter app, I actually generated 635 kilowatt hours. The difference was the self-consumption. So we later expanded our system to meet our actual annual consumption. And so then we have what I would consider to be an appropriately sized system. And here you can see on the left, the microgen credits now surpass the energy charges. And at this point, I'm able to be on the high rate. So if you look at the right side of the screen, you'll see both the energy and the microgen are being charged and credited, respectively, at 30 cents a kilowatt hour. And again, same thing, I was net billed here for 498 kilowatt hours, but my inverter app was showing 620 kilowatt hours. And these two screens, the previous one and this one, are for the exact same period of time, April 15th to May 14th or 13th, give or take 1 day. So they're pretty comparable in terms of a direct one-to-one comparison. And then when things really start to take off is when you start accumulating those export credits. So again, you can see on the left, my microgen credits now are $500, almost $600, versus my energy charges at $93. For a savings, and when you look at balance carrying forward, that works out to now a massive credit that I can carry forward and continue to draw against later on. I mentioned variable. If your system is undersized and you can't access the higher rates, a variable rate is actually a really good option to consider because variable rates have historically been pretty good on the long run over a long period of time, but also very recently, variable rates have been quite low. This also works for anybody who is appropriately sized and is switching between rates. You don't have to switch to a fixed rate. You can always switch to a variable rate, and that will allow you to access even greater savings in the winter months. The thing to remember is you want to look for those transaction fees. So you can see here on the screen, one of our retailers uses a 0.67 cents per kilowatt hour transaction fee on top of the variable market price. Currently, I think the 30-day average is about 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour when you factor in that transaction fee. You also want to look at min fees. And specifically when you're looking at min fees, you want to look at daily admin fees. So if that retailer charges daily admin fees versus a monthly fee, that's something to consider. And then you want to ask for historical pricing, which they should be able to provide you. So ask for it. When you're looking at solar specific programs, you want to ask for other things. So ask for things like data analytics. So they should be able to provide you with historical data. When we do this, we make sure that we align the dates so that the comparison is actually correct. because your import, the way that the electricity industry works, is all happens on transactions. Your imports and your export files, they're two separate files. And so those dates don't always align. And it's really important that they actually do align so that you can get a proper comparison so that it's apples to apples. You can't really compare April 4th, let's say, to April 30th as your imports, and then compare April 15th to May 14th for your exports. That comparison is not really accurate because the dates don't align. So that's something that we do and have worked really hard to make sure that you're getting a one-to-one comparison. You can also look for things like cashback programs. Those provide extra revenue that can be used to improve your ROI. Credit transfers allow you to use your microgen credits to pay off other invoices or other accounts. And then you want to look for automatic rate switching, which makes optimizing your microgen credits really, really easy. And so that's where the system will actually switch you between the higher rate and the lower rate, depending on your data. And then I also mentioned we established a carbon credit program. This is something that exists out in the market. So you can sell carbon credits generated by your system in what's called Alberta's compliance market. The compliance market, as some of you may know, is for large industry emitters. So what that means is you are essentially selling the carbon credits generated by your system so that large emitters can offset their emissions. So if that's important to you, that's something to remember. A different way of looking at it is the money you get from selling your carbon credits is revenue you wouldn't otherwise have had. If you don't sell your carbon credits, they get generated by your system and they effectively vanish. So that's also something to remember. There are several aggregators, that's what they're called, in Alberta, such as Solar Offset and Rewatt Power, who can help you sell your carbon credits. It does require a little bit of work each year, which basically amounts to sending some data to them every year. So it does require a little bit of work each year in terms of some data, and those agreements are also 10 years long. The latest quoted price that I received is $39 per ton, which is effectively $39 per credit as of January 2026. And you'll want to compare commission costs to assess which aggregator to use. So the last thing I want to touch on, there's a few frequently asked questions, and these may be in the Q&A already. I haven't looked. So the first one is, how do I know if I qualify for a solar specific rate plan? You need to be a microgenerator. And that means your site needs to be registered as a microgenerator by your wires company. In Calgary, the wires company is Enmax. In Edmonton, the wires company is EPCOR. In Southern Alberta, it's Fortis. And in Northern Alberta, it's ATCO. How to choose a solar specific rate plan provider. You can compare low rates. You can look for other benefits that improve your ROI. How do you switch rates? Some retailers have an online portal and you can go online and do it yourself. Some of them you have to call and ask them to actually switch you physically. And then some of them will actually just do it for you if they have an automatic rate switching program. How often should you switch? Typically, you should be switching twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. If you're switching more often than that, you're really not accessing the benefits of solar specific rates. Keeping in mind, your meter is a bidirectional cumulative meter, meaning it gets read once a month. So if you've got 10 days in a month where it's cloudy or it snows, switching between rates multiple times in that month is not going to do you any good because your meter is still going to be read once a month. Some retailers will allow you to leave your generation credits on file, and that's so that you can draw against them in the winter months when you are a net importer. Will I generate enough? Again, coming back to system sizing, if your system is sized appropriately, whether that's 100 to, and this is an unstated value, 105%, then yes, you probably will generate enough. If your system is slightly undersized, we found by about 5%, you can still get away with switching between high and low rates. We talked about the microgen readings on your bill versus what's shown on your inverter app. So again, your inverter app is pure generation, and what's on your bill is what's net billed. And then how does solar impact D&T charges? So like Stephanie was saying earlier, any energy that you don't import from the grid, that you are self-consuming on site, doesn't incur D&T charges. Everything else will, but if you're self-consuming by load shifting, then you can absolutely reduce your D&T charges, or at least a variable portion of your D&T charges. All right, so thank you for listening to all of that. I hope that was informative, and I'll stop sharing now.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren. Welcome back to the screen, Justin and Stephanie. It's great to hear all of your presentations today. We have a very active and engaged crowd, and I appreciate that. Just a reminder to everybody in attendance that we are putting questions in the Q&A box rather than the chat, because I cannot monitor both at the same time. Also, a reminder to upvote each other's questions so that we get to the ones that are most popular. I'm seeing lots of thanks in the chat for you all. All right, let's get started here. So Andrew has a question. I think I'll probably actually go to you first on this one, Darren, and then Justin, if you want to take a stab too. If I reduce my consumption, can I use those credits towards delivery charges, meter charges, or even gas charges if combined to retailer? Or will they only let you credit against kilowatt hours? Got approved to get solar this year, finally. And I think you answered that in your presentation, Darren, which is why I'm going to you first for a little repeat.
Yeah, so the big thing here, especially with solar installers, is solar will not eliminate your bill. You will always have those D&T charges. Your retailer, however, may allow you to apply those credits to cover the balance of your bill. So in my case, my microgen credits are enough to cover my D&T charges, which allows me to have a net credit on my bills. So I still have those charges, but my credits are enough to offset all of those things.
Anything to add there, Justin?
No, I think he covered it pretty well.
Covered it well. Good. Angelique is wondering, my array only covers about 65% of my home's annual usage, with even the summer months production often very close to my usage. Should I still switch to a higher solar rate in the summer months? I think you answered this one, Darren. The answer would be no. Anything to add to that?
I would say probably not. It is a little bit of a gamble. And if you find a retailer, so we, for example, we offer automatic rate switching. We do it based on data. If you are never a net exporter, we'll never switch you to the high rate. And that's one way of approaching that, especially with these automatic rate switching that's being offered by other retailers. That's one way of tackling it. But if your retailer doesn't do automatic rate switching and you're guessing, it's a lot of gambling. I used to have to do it for my own site, and it used to stress me out so much because I just didn't know if I was making the right choice or not. So really, it may come down to a gut feel, but automatic rate switching might help in that situation.
Yeah, and we're in the exact same boat that you were, Darren. When we had our first solar system installed, the electric vehicle that we purchased after meant that we really weren't a net exporter, even in the middle of the summer. So we were pretty nervous about switching rates. And we have now got an addition to our system to offset that electric vehicle. And so we're kind of looking forward to switching rates for the first time this year in the summer. And yeah, that automated system also allows you to take great comfort that you're not you're not getting in over your head by accident. I will say, though, I made the mistake. I went to a friend's home in spring, and we didn't think anything of it. I just charged my vehicle there. She's got solar, I've got solar. We didn't think any of it. Then I left her home after a few days, and she remembered, oh darn, I switched my rate. And so she got dinged pretty hard that month because of my visit. So I sent her a little thank you package in the mail. But yeah, it was interesting as a visitor. I hadn't really thought, if she's already switched her rate, and if she's not on an automatic rate switching thing, of course nobody would think about an electric vehicle in a home that doesn't have one. So that was a funny little hiccup that hadn't really occurred to either of us. All right, Ian has a question here. Did I hear you correctly, Justin? Did you create an app that can be used by microgenerators? question for you.
So, sort of. I've probably logged 300 plus hours trying to create this app, which pulls hundreds of documents from the ASO and EPCOR and connects to your inverters. And it never got to a point where it could reliably calculate everything. There's always one more exception that I got to. So it's very hard to do holistically. So no, it's something that's never been released. But some of the screenshots you saw were from my internal version of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for trying. We certainly appreciate the effort. Andrew has a question here. I heard the bill credits expire after 1 year. Is this true? Andrew, you might have been talking to someone from another province. I mean, there's a question for you, Darren. I understand in Alberta, you can either carry things over or you can get paid out at the end of the year. But in other provinces, they will claw back at the end of the year in other provinces, I think. So that's probably who Andrew was talking to, is out of province folks. What do you have to say on that one though, Darren?
Yeah, so under regulation, you're right. The credits have to be trued up once every 12 months. If you are drawing against them in the winter months, so if you leave them on file and you draw against them over the winter, you are drawing technically the first dollar credited is the first dollar used, right? And so therefore you are technically always rolling forward. If your system is oversized, within regulation, and you are still earning enough credit that you're not using it all in the wintertime, and so you're not coming out to effectively $0 over the course of a year, then yes, your retailer should be truing it up with you and refunding the balance to you and starting all over again.
Yeah, but not clawing your credits away or your money.
No.
It's been fascinating for me to learn about other provinces recently and how harsh they are on their micro generators. So I'm glad we have our regulations here. Tim has a question here. How does the high rate get set? Is 30 to 33 cents limited by the electrical, like by ISO, or can the solar club set this as they see fit? And I guess that would apply to any retailer. Can they set their high rate as they choose, or is there a structure for that?
Technically, any retailer can set that rate however they want. The way that we do that is we look at what the market can bear, because those credits flow through ISO. So when you are exporting, when you're getting export credits, those credits come from ISO through your retailer to you. And so we're mindful of that because, as much as the regulation doesn't limit what the high rate can be, we need to be reasonable about this, because the intention of the regulation is not to profit off microgeneration. The intention is to fully offset your consumption. So that is the intention of the regulation. So as long as we're meeting the intention, we feel that we are setting a rate that is reasonable within Alberta's market.
Yeah, I mean, it is very unique here in Alberta, just that we have this free market sort of capitalist system, and it must be very confusing coming from other jurisdictions where you just have the Crown Corp and they set their rates and no choice in retailers. So could be a little overwhelming here, I imagine, trying to select a retailer sometimes. We do have 13 retailers, I should mention, in the Solar Alberta directory. They offer solar specific pricing plans. So if folks are very overwhelmed by the selection of a retailer, you can check our directory and kind of narrow your search down to 13. And the nice thing about that is you can then hold them accountable to the Alberta Solar Business Code of Conduct, which is sort of going above and beyond provincial regulations. Jesse has two different questions here, so we're going to start with one and then we'll jump into the other one. Is there any indication that Alberta might switch from net billing to net metering? I can begin with a stab at that, and then you guys can add as you so desire. So to make that change, the Alberta government would have to open up the microgeneration regulation. And I did speak with them I guess it would have been a year or so ago, and they said they'll open it at some point, but they didn't have any plan to open it in the near future. I'm not sure if you've heard any updates on that, Darren, but I don't think they were itching to make changes to that right now, because what was explained to me is they're busy changing the entire electricity system right now, and they're so busy dealing with changing the entire system that they're not really interested in some of the smaller regulations right now. So while we're in the midst of sort of the wholesale transition of the sector, they're kind of leaving that reg alone. So I don't see any plans to change from net billing to net metering in the near future. Have you guys heard any rumors otherwise?
I have not. So I mentioned this to those who attended yesterday. I meet with Minister Neudorf on a regular basis. Minister Neudorf is the Minister of Affordability and Utilities. He and his team have given no indication that they are going to open up the microgen regulation. Like you said, they're focused on the restructured energy market, or REM design, which affects the overall industry design. And so they've given no indication that they'll switch from net billing to net metering. They've given no indication about making changes to the cap on how much you can produce or how much you can install. Those sorts of things they're leaving alone. The only changes we've heard were from the Alberta Utilities Commission, or AUC, when they did their consultation last summer. And that is specifically focused around Rule 24, rules governing microgeneration. And that is specific to installers and the industry players. So there hasn't been any talk of doing anything to this. So as far as we're aware, nothing is going anywhere and nothing is changing.
Yeah, we are following that very closely, because that is a matter that affects pretty much all of our members. So I would say if people are interested in keeping an eye on the microgen reg and any changes that might be coming forward, please do sign up as a member. We do engage our members regularly in our advocacy activities. And as Darren mentioned, when the AUC was sort of dabbling around the edges on this subject in the summer, both the Solar Club and we made a real effort to make sure that we were all on the record for the changes that we would like to see when and if they open up the regulation. And I believe when we calculated the impact of our combined advocacy efforts there, it was quite hilarious. Looked at the submissions, and I think we influenced like over 900 of the 960 submissions between the two organizations. So the AUC took our feedback, and they did forward it on to the government of Alberta, saying we wanted to preserve some of the really good aspects of our microgen regulation, because it's clear with 42,000 microgenerators and growing in Alberta that our regulation is superior to that of all other provinces. So we really don't want to mess with a good thing. And we want to only see improvements. So let's just touch on the second part of Jesse's question here as a separate question. How long are the current high and low Solar Club rates guaranteed for?
That depends on the retailer, the solar specific rate provider. So for us, any Solar Club rate that you see is guaranteed for either 1 or 3 years. So we just introduced a 1-year low rate last year in November, but we also have 3 years. And typically our rates are set for 3 years, so they're guaranteed for that length of time. But of course, with Alberta's market and all the retailers, you can switch rates with either no consequence or very little consequence. Most retailers don't charge anything to switch rates. Some do, but generally speaking, you should be able to switch between new high rates, new low rates as you see fit. But again, that's a question for your retailer specifically.
Thanks for that. Stuart has a question here. I'm going to start on this one, and then I'll pass the mic to y'all if you have anything you'd like to add. But regarding the solar duck curve, where do you see Alberta along the curve? How do you see the evolution of the Alberta duck curve impacting Solar Club, generation incentives, etc.? So the duck curve, I'll let folks Google that, but essentially there's this thing that occurs in some jurisdictions when you get loads of renewables on the grid with sort of intermittent reliability. Then if you don't have enough energy storage on the grid at the same time or enough transmission capability at the same time, you can have some issues with grid reliability. So on the whole, this is really just not an issue in Alberta because 78% of our grid is natural gas. Solar is only 4% of Alberta's grid right now, and micro generators are not even 1% of that. So we are way too small to contribute in any way whatsoever to the overarching trends that we would see in terms of grid reliability in Alberta. However, over time, the goal would be to shift away from natural gas and increase renewables on the grid. So we do want to see, as that shift occurs, we want to see more energy storage on the grid. We want to see more transmission interties with other jurisdictions, just to make sure that we can kind of ride that wave, and that if, in the dark of winter, if the wind's not blowing, that we can still all have power. So you will see Solar Alberta very actively promoting energy storage because we think it's a beautiful blend with solar and wind. And we also actively promote transmission interties with other jurisdictions to enhance grid reliability. But we are so far off from renewables having a significant impact on the reliability of our grid in Alberta. Even when you combine all the renewables together, we're not even 30% of the grid. So we are really ways away from having any grid reliability issues that could be attributable to renewables in Alberta. I know we hear differently in the news sometimes when people like to fearmonger, but we're just not there yet. Sometimes I wish we were that powerful, but we aren't that powerful to have that much of an impact yet. So anyways, just my thoughts on that. But Darren, the question was specifically about impacting Solar Club and other generating incentives. Do you see that evolution over time shifting things?
I would say, I agree what you said. The duck curve here in Alberta is not as significant as it is in a jurisdiction like California, as an example, or Texas. You'll also now start to hear about a concept that industry players are floating around called beheading the duck curve. And that basically just takes the top off that peak that happens when everyone gets home and when the sun starts to set. In terms of the impact to the Solar Club, there shouldn't be an impact. As far as that's concerned, our involvement in the restructured energy market design, that's where the government is looking to put in place measures to mitigate the emergence of a severe duck curve here in Alberta. That's really the goal of that redesign. So it shouldn't impact us, shouldn't impact how you're generating, but also we're seeing more adoption of battery storage at home, and that also is going to mitigate the duck curve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is nice to see that the province is starting to pilot more and more distributed energy storage initiatives. And we did have a webinar about virtual power plant pilot that's happening here in Alberta. And Emissions Reduction Alberta has given batteries to 100 homes to try and sort of improve upon some of the issues that might eventually come if we continue to expand our renewable sector. So we're definitely getting out ahead of any potential issue by being so thoughtful about these things well in advance. Anyways, Justin, anything you wanted to add, or Stephanie, on this grid reliability and solar duck curve matter? It's definitely a bigger issue when you look at like utility scale solar, where you would see a lot more variability. If you add up like all the micro generators in the province, we're still producing less electricity together than just like the Traverse Solar Farm, for example, in Vulcan County. So I hate to say it, we're still a bit player. I think we matter a lot, and I'm excited that together we equal a solar farm, but unfortunately we're not so influential yet on the grid, but people are definitely trying to get ahead of any issues there in Alberta. Lisa, welcome Lisa. Our board member's here with a question for us. Can you share a sample electricity bill for a solar prosumer? Does the electricity bill tell me how much electricity my home is self-consuming? Justin, I'm going to go to you on this one.
What do we mean by prosumer here?
I don't know, but I'm guessing that's like a nice term for a consumer. Maybe you're like, maybe it's like you're consuming, but you're also producing.
Yeah, it's a proactive consumer. They're the ones who are more involved in their consumption pattern in the
Nice.
billing.
Darren with the lingo. Thank you.
No, I don't know of any way that self-consumption would ever show up on your electricity bill unless they had access directly to your inverter as well. And I don't know of any one that does that yet. So it's, yeah, it for now has to be something you calculate yourself.
Yeah, let's put that on Darren's to-do list, shall we? I'm sure your to-do list isn't long enough.
It is something
Give me
we've
a
looked
call,
at.
Darren, if you if you need some help with the math on it.
We
It's
might have
something
to.
we've looked at because you can, and there is a company out there who developed a program that connects to the installer, the inverter apps, and synchronizes the data. And that is something we've explored, but at this current point in time, not something we're going to do.
Yeah, maybe we should turn our lobby efforts on to you guys, Darren, and get the full force of Solar Alberta like moving on. That would be a hilarious reversal of roles. We just try and get them to change their bills entirely. Yeah, no, that's tricky, but thank you for teaching us about the possibilities today. All right, so there's a question here. If my neighbor had a solar PV system and I don't, would I use their exported energy first? Would that decrease my delivery charges? So if you do not have solar on your home, you would never see the direct impact on your utility bill. However, what would happen is your neighbor who has solar is basically reducing the need for your wire provider, your utility, to add extra distribution and transmission infrastructure to your neighborhood. So they are reducing your electricity bill by reducing the need for the wire provider to build out the electricity grid in your neighborhood. So you can thank your neighbor for that, but you're not going to see any immediate direct impact on your bill. They're just doing that as a nice public service, and it'll show up in the overall rate that we are, paying for all ratepayers, but it's not going to show up directly on any neighbor's bill. Anything you folks wanted to add to that response, though?
Nope.
All right, let's see here. How does Solar Club earn enough to offer high export rate to pay in excess of typical 10 cents or 8 cents a kilowatt hour total energy plus T and D rates? So we're looking at your business model here, Darren, and I have a feeling you're going to be limited in how much you can answer on that one. But
no.
you could give us some insight.
Yeah, I can answer that. It's so the reality is that it's not money from Solar Club. We're not paying you for your microgen credits. So what happens is your meter gets read. We receive that data. That data we tie to your rate because we're your retailer. So we say, okay, you exported this much. You're being billed at this rate, which becomes your export rate. And then that file gets sent to ISO. And then ISO reads it. They send us the credits, and then we flow them right back to you. So there's no risk of a solar specific rate provider not being able to afford to credit you with those credits, unless they're doing something fishy with the accounting in the back end. But generally speaking, it's a credits come from ISO. We flow them. Those credits come back to us. We flow them back to you. So that's how that functions. And in that sense, there's no risk of the Solar Club ever really going anywhere. And the same goes for all the other solar-specific providers. There shouldn't be any risk to those programs going under because of more people adopting solar and becoming microgenerators and earning more microgen credits. All of those funds are coming back from ISO.
Yeah, thank you. So another question here, is a microgenerator able to sell carbon credits if they receive the Edmonton Municipal or previous Alberta provincial grant before the current government, or did they sign their rights away in exchange for these grants? Yes, typically you would sign your carbon credit rights away when you receive government money for solar, and the reason for that is the reason the governments are giving you a grant is because they're looking for emissions reductions. So if they allow you to sell that, then they're not achieving any emissions reductions. If you sell your carbon credits, the person who's achieving the emission reductions is the industrial facility. So if you sell your carbon credits, you're not reducing emissions. The industrial facility that buys them is reducing emissions instead. And so that's why most governments that are granting for the purposes of emissions reduction will say you can't sell your credits. So yeah, you'll have to read your contracts for any grant or incentive programs, but they typically remove that possibility. And that's just because, yeah, they're looking for emissions reductions, and without that, you've taken away their emissions reductions. There may be some grants out there that are not oriented towards emissions reductions and that aren't concerned with climate. So maybe they wouldn't care if you sold off your credits, but most often if governments are subsidizing these types of programs, it's because they're concerned with the climate. So yeah, that's a quick answer. Hopefully that answers your question. And it's good food for thoughts for anyone who is considering selling off their carbon credits. Do you want to sell your green attribute? So you're selling the green attribute of your solar system is what the money is for. So anyways, hopefully that answers. Yeah, please feel free.
If you're interested in doing that, talk to an aggregator, Solar Offset, Rewatt Power. There's a bunch of other ones in the market. They have a list of all the grants, and they know which ones where you signed away your right to the credits and where you keep them. So if you're not sure and you don't want to look through your own contract, you can always talk to the aggregators and they will tell you the answer. So the big one that everyone asks about is the Canada Greener Homes Loan and the Canada Greener Homes Grant. Those ones you can still sell your carbon credits.
Okay. And we actually have 2 webinars about carbon credits in our YouTube channel if people are curious what those are and what they're all about. So you can check out those 2 webinars if you're curious. How will home battery or V2H, V2G change the microgen market? Are the regulations up to date and considering the impact? Interesting question. We are having a battery session tomorrow. How will the battery situation change the microgen market? I suppose you can then store more of your electricity and you could then self-consume more of your electricity, which would, as we've seen through Justin's calculations, give you a better net benefit than if you weren't consuming your own electricity. So on the whole, you would save more money if you had a battery, but you would see less on your utility bill. Because it would be all that secret savings that Justin was discussing. Justin, do you want to add anything there? I think we should retitle yours Secret Savings with Justin Smalley.
Yeah, you need some clickbait in there. That's not my area of expertise. Yeah, I think the other thing that makes batteries not as attractive in Alberta is in the summer, you are exporting way more than you're using. And in the winter, you're exporting way less. Somewhere like, say, California, it's reasonable to fill your batteries during the day, completely empty them at night. And that just makes it a little bit more attractive and make a little bit more sense. The other factor is I believe you lose about 10% of your energy by storing it in the battery and getting it out. So you're losing a little bit just through that process.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that about batteries. So we're definitely going to start getting a lot more questions about batteries as the price starts dropping a bit. And also because Alberta's looking at some demand side management programs. So I don't know when those will roll or if they'll roll, but hopefully there'll be some incentives in place for people to consider battery purchases more in Alberta. I know they're certainly incentivizing that in other provinces across the country. So we'll definitely have to start factoring those into all of our calculations down the road. Maybe Justin, next year we could do a fourth option. Your dryer use if you have a battery. That could be fun.
Yeah. There's one other piece to that, and it comes down to which wires territory you're located in. Because battery storage, and we've started to look at some of this stuff as well on our side, the savings is really in the distribution and transmission charges and what you can reduce in the evenings when you're drawing off your battery or your vehicle, in the case of V to H, which is vehicle to home. And so if you're located in ATCO or Fortis territory, your D&T charges tend to be higher than if you're located in Edmonton or Calgary. So the advantage to battery storage is actually greater in territories where the D&T charges tend to be higher. V to G is not something we see a whole lot of here in Alberta. I think personally for myself, I've got 2 electric vehicles, and I don't want to wear the batteries down any faster than I need to by discharging them into the grid or to my home, because those are expensive to replace. So, personally, I would say V to H and V to G are not good things to be doing, but I know Ford likes to advertise their F-150 Lightning truck as being something that can power anything, so that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, and maybe, to have that capability in an emergency, but maybe not to use it all the time. I'm not sure. So lots of questions about that, and definitely more to explore at solar shows in the future. I think we only have time for one more question here, so I'm just going to ask a quick one that Greg has asked here. Are the cash credits considered income by CRA? Darren, are you aware if we need to, input those in our taxes in any way? It's tax time in Canada, so everybody's got that on the mind. So I don't think I've ever had a question related to that when filing my taxes. Maybe QuickBooks is missing a missing a question, but yeah.
No, there's no tax implications. It's part of your utility costs, and so there isn't any tax implications, especially because the regulation is structured the way it is, and you can't overproduce and profit off the grid. If you could, maybe a different situation, but because you can't, and also because you've invested, $25,000, $30,000, $35,000, $40,000 into your system, shouldn't be really taxed on the credits you're getting off of those. But as far as we're aware, there's no tax implications.
If anything, I'm hoping the government of Canada will consider some kind of tax write-off because you've invested in solar. They are doing that for businesses. Businesses can get a 30% tax credit if they invest in solar. So my hope is, now that they've taken away the Canada Greener Homes loan and grant, that maybe they will give us some benefits come tax time if we take that initiative of investing in solar ourselves. So might have to add that to our lobby list, but hopefully we could see benefits in the future, and certainly you don't see any negatives right now. So
yeah. I will only just add real quickly is I'm not a tax accountant. So anything I've said on that topic, that is not, legal advice.
Yes, thank you. Good point. And things do change suddenly, as we've learned. There's a lot of changes happening all around us politically right now. So have to keep an eye on these things. So, well, thank you so much, Darren, Justin, Stephanie, for your presentations today. This has been excellent. I think the audience was super engaged. Thank you to the very engaged audience. And of course, to our sponsor today, so thankful to the City of Edmonton Change for Climate for making this session possible. Have a wonderful day, and tomorrow morning, more batteries. So hopefully we'll see some of you at Eric's session on batteries, where we can really dig into some of those battery questions even more. Have a wonderful afternoon, and look forward to seeing most of you tomorrow.